So we talked a little bit about the introduction of the base camp rack to the universities, and I think that will forever be, the universities, the professional league teams, that will always be our bread and butter. How did we transition that rack from university use, high-level use, into mainstream use? What was the foundation there?
Well, they kind of, as you said, the rig, or what we call the BaseFit, came online really in the same premise of the four-way hole design and be able to put accessories onto the rack. So it was a customization where the base camp was kind of the welded version, the rig or the BaseFit version. The problem,
you're talking about a rig like what you'd see at a typical CrossFit type gym?
Yeah, what you basically see at every CrossFit. I don't think what people understand is prior to 2008, every CrossFit had something that was welded or a local guy would come over with a welder and literally weld out a piece of equipment, this giant jungle gym type thing, as a pull-up rig, they called it. And
everything was anchored to
everything
a wall
was anchored
that you're not sure. You're sure your equipment will hold up,
right?
But you're not sure will that wall or ceiling hold what you're trying to put up there,
right?
Sure. So the problem was this. So we would see these facilities, and generally what happens with a CrossFit or small gym, they start the gym because they want to train. They get a little bit bigger. They buy equipment, and then 2 years later, if they're successful, they buy a new place. Well, now they have this conglomeration of nonsense that's welded all through the facility, so they just ditch their money and they have to cut this thing apart, but they can't reuse it. And you can't ship it. You can't, if you do it wrong, it's terrible. The military was needing pieces downrange, but they were having guys try to weld up things. So I got thinking, and Pops, we went back and forth, said, okay, what if we had something that was, you could ship on a pallet? There were uprights, cross members, pins, J-cups that could be configured in any manner that you would like. So say a CrossFit or a small gym, you could start in your garage with 2 uprights and a cross member as a chin-up bar, and then when you want to open your own box, you just add uprights to it. And the idea that really changed it was adding the holes in all 4 directions. First time I went to the CrossFit Games, the 2008 in Aromas at Castro's house, I showed up with the first BaseFit rig ever, first CrossFit rig, and I would say probably 10% of the people at the games got it. That they even understood what they were looking at. Everyone goes, oh, cool, a pull-up rig. I said, well, you have holes on all 4 sides and you got J-cups. Do you guys sell squat stands?
Right.
I said, okay, this is your squat stand. You could bench, and we actually had a deck on it so you could do all your box jumps. So it was everything, dips, everything. And they go, but we need box jumps and we need squat stands and we need pull-up. Do y'all make pull-up rigs? And I went, okay. And so maybe my inability to keep from being frustrated, I felt like a couple people got it. Some people, they got it and they snapped it right up.
Right.
But then it took a while for people to start understanding that, this is a very, very viable solution in the industry. And I would say arguably it's probably the biggest Sorinex design of all time, because there's companies that have been stood up that just to make rigs. I mean, but that technology wasn't there, and that's what I don't think people understand is prior to that, everything was custom built, welded by somebody, or hacked and moved around to kind of fit a need, or a weird size room. Well, you couldn't get regular pieces in there, but the rig allowed you to adjust to whatever you needed and then to readjust. So probably it was strange simplicity that solved that one.
And as their business grew, all you would do is add parts, more pieces, instead of having, as you said, to reconfigure the whole room.
Sure. Or
have something so antiquated and ugly, no one wanted to really train on it. It gave you the flexibility as your business grew to grow with it.
And really at that time too, the war was really hitting hard in Iraq and Afghanistan. I was hearing people talk about training, and they were buying from these companies and they were sending these dedicated pieces of equipment over. And they said once they would get on their base, if they had to move, a lot of times they would just leave it. They just leave it in the desert because they couldn't use it for this or that. And I heard people, they literally dug holes and just pushed equipment into the hole and just filled it up out in the middle of wherever. And the idea was, well, if we could send them a pallet of these things that in a very military-like use, they could bolt it together in a multiple positions and configurations, and then maybe this platoon breaks up and they take half, they still have viable pieces of equipment that they could use anywhere, and everything works together. It's all interchangeable, so it's another piece of kit for our men and women, our vets. That was the idea. And actually the first BaseFit was made in black texture. It was a military green powder coat. There was a heat-resistive powder coat, military green and tan, and we would put them together, and that kept the heat-resistive paint in the sunlight. It kept from burning their hands.
That's pretty amazing. So, I mean, we got our foundation in that through CrossFit.
Sure.
And then we answered a calling to the military.
Correct.
And do we still emphasize those rigs as much, or is it something that we built and then have evolved since then? I mean, what is your take on the rig as an industry standard, such as
Sure.
you said, or are we looking beyond that? Are we doing things to evolve it even more?
Oh, we're certainly looking beyond it. I mean, there's enough people that have copied that first iteration. There's enough replica BaseFit rigs out there now that staying in that water is no longer fruitful. We're just doing what Sorinex does best and look down the road and see what the next thing is. I'm more interested. That's the adventure ahead, not ground we've already covered.
So, as far as CrossFit exploding, the rigs exploding, what is our role in the industry, such as a CrossFit sided industry or a more generalized fitness industry for the mass consumer? What is our answer to their question of how do I supply my gym, my home gym? Because that's the argument I hear a lot too.
Okay.
Well, I've just got a home gym. I don't need all that. Well, to me, trying to optimize space, that sells itself even more.
Absolutely. Really, that the basic first rig was a really low-tech way to totally change a method of doing things that they wanted to do. They had a prescribed number of workouts that required certain kinds of equipment, and this was a very low-tech way to do it. Well, once you figure it out, how to build the first light bulb, then other people can copy it, and then it becomes a price war. So the rig idea, while being earth-shattering, was very simple. So other people embraced it very quickly, I think,
Yeah.
and went on with it. Still, for home use, you could have one or two rigs, and it's perfect. You're not worrying about destroying your garage or your walls or whatever. And let's say your needs change. You want to put it outside, fine, great. If you, let's say, decide not to train anymore, all the value is there. You could turn it on down the line to the next person. So being a low-tech thing, it was still the concept of doing it so much different really shook up the world. It did.
Is it something, when you talk about simplicity, and sometimes the most complex things are simple, but from a simplistic nature, did it satisfy your creative mind, or was it just, were you just kind of filling a hole that needed to be filled?
It seemed so obvious that there had to be a better way.
Right.
And for that moment when we dwelled on it and thought about it and say, this needs to be better, because a lot of people are trying this and they're becoming involved in it. And let's make it a little safer and easier and better. And so you wouldn't have to get a welder to come in your house.
Right.
That you could buy this thing and it would show up. And maybe if you had to adjust it a little bit, you could, to fit in your lower ceiling or your trying to put it in a corner, it could work. There were a lot of different, we came up with 40 or 50 different configurations of the BaseFit.
Sure.
And it's just geometric patterns. I mean, it was pretty exciting after a while.
It was fun.
To see with 50? We did one with 50 different stations interlocked.
Sure. And the idea of it, too, was for the home gym person, because I didn't have kids at the time, but the idea was, got to remember, Sorinex was a derivative of Sorin Equipment, which started at Soren Playgrounds. So I saw it as bringing back that presidential fitness model of getting kids working. And now someone could have a piece of equipment in their home that they could bench, squat, deadlift, pull up, everything like that. But also it could turn into a jungle gym with different attachments for their kids. That is more of a gymnastics type approach. They could have pull-up bars in different positions. So then it kind of pulls together the family fitness model that maybe a normal squat rack or a chest press or something like that wasn't doing at the time.
The greatest thing you could share, if you really think about it, the passion you have for lifting and being strong or being fit, it's every man's or woman's dream to pass that down to their children. Now, there is an opportunity that you could modify these pieces and involve your children with things that you so dearly love. That bridges a gap that we all dream of, but I think sadly has not been addressed much. There's people that squat world's records or set total records that daddy's at the gym and he came back and set a record, but they're not part of sharing that. When they do their first squat on daddy's rack, everyone gets closer, everyone moves up. That's a thing. When the records are done and the trophies are tarnished, the bond with the family is going to always be there. And when the first time my little 6-year-old grandson gets it, that there's value in training, and I could do what G-Pops or Daddy can do, the world gets better.
Do you think a stronger world is a better world?
Absolutely.
No question.